I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. All right, Main Street Media, KMMU. This is John. I am your host, John, of Main Street Media Live. We are now broadcasting and looking forward to interacting with you. I'll be introducing my guest just momentarily, but let's get this show off to a proper start. Here, Tuesdays. I almost went into my K Talk opening, but here, Tuesdays, 4 to 6 p.m. on Main Street Media, you'll be able to join me and interact with me as I talk to my guests. And also, from time to time, I'll be able to talk to you. So the call-in lines is 385-899-2134. I know that we may not have any call-ins, and that's fine because the guest that I have about to join me, definitely he and I, we could chew fat for hours. But here's the thing about him. He actually brings good information. Hopefully, from time to time, I might bring a piece of good information myself. So, once again, my name is John. I have a show on K Talk Radio that has been up and running for several years. On K Talk Radio, KBJA AM 1640, based out of Salt Lake County. Looking forward to being with you for the next 2 hours and, well, roughly 2 hours until 6 o'clock Utah time and 8 p.m. Eastern time, where my guest is joining me at. So let me quickly also, before I do get going with every show, today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. And I want to, before I get going with my show, what I like to do is start off with my show prayer. My show prayer is a big piece of it. As I said before, hey, I'm a hypocrite. I'm not perfect, far from it, but it kind of, hopefully you can see where I'm coming from, and then I'm going to give my show mantra. So let's get this show off to a proper start as it is. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. That is the show prayer. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. That's taken from Article 7 of the Constitution, as well as places throughout Scripture, such as 2 Chronicles chapter 3, verse 17. Now, who I have joining me today is Michael Letts of Invest USA. So let me get right to introducing him to you, the audience. Michael Letts is the CEO, founder of Invest USA. He is also the president. Now, investusa.org, that's invest, INVEST, USA.org, is a national grassroots nonprofit organization that is helping hundreds of communities provide thousands of bulletproof vests for their police forces through educational, public relations, sponsorship, and fundraising programs. He also has over 30 years of law enforcement experience under his belt, hence his pro-police stance for his brothers and sisters in blue. Those interested in learning more can visit his official website, once again, investusa.org. He also has another, I guess you could say, a sister 501c3 that's restoringjustice.us. So, Michael Letts, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today on Talk with John. Now, we have some things being scrolled through by our production team, and I want to say thank you to them. Not exactly sure who was doing that, but that was pretty cool.
That was the website.
So, Michael, thank you for joining me today, brother.
Thank you, and thank you for showing the website. I appreciate that. It's always a privilege to be here.
Well, that was the website. Well, for heaven's sakes, maybe we ought to bring that sucker up again. I mean,
That was
look at
one
that
small
website.
section.
That is, and can I tell you? Okay, to the audience, this is not a big deal to you, but to me, and I'm gonna. Okay, hold on. So once again, I'm gonna bring up the website again, and you've made some really nice changes to it. Holy moly, fantastic! So let's. This is new to me. I haven't seen this part of the website before. So well done. You told me there was being some changes made. Now, okay. So back to where I was going before I was diverted. Before I was diverted, then rediverted. Boy, I'm like that squirrel. Whoop, what? What?
Squirrel, squirrel.
Okay. So once again, the the audience won't understand this, but Michael, you do. I am on my own on the radio show on K Talk. I am the producer. I'm the call screener. I'm the host. I am post production. I am, I do all that stuff on my own. To have a producer just start doing that for me was super awesome. So, Dwayne, I want to say thank you to you for being there. Appreciate everything you do. Thanks for doing that, man. That was awesome. I didn't even know that we quite had that functionality. So, Michael Letts is, as I shared with at the beginning, you have a organization called Invest USA. Now, real quickly, I want to mention that you give out bullet quote unquote bulletproof vests, but they're active shooter vests to law enforcement. You've also gone down to the southern border and even handed them out to, I believe it's the Guard as well. I don't even, have you given it to active duty soldiers down on the border? I can't remember if that's
We
the
gave
case.
them to the guard on the border. We gave active duty vests to active duty soldiers when they got called over to Afghanistan and Iraq, and they were unprepared for it.
Well, I want to say thank you for doing that. Thank you for taking care of our brothers out there that are trying to, that are in general. I'm going to say 99% of them are good guys, probably a little bit more. And frankly, they'd be a whole lot that we'd have a lot more good guys if those above them who are giving the orders were good guys.
Right.
Boy, that we'd have a lot more good people. It seems like they're trying to get rid of some of the good ones, especially at the top, and that's working its way down. And so, folks, I'm going to have Michael Letts on. I'm not exactly sure how frequency on my Monday and Tuesday show on the radio. He's on every Monday, typically now in the second hour. So if you want to tune into that, you absolutely can. My show is Mondays and Tuesdays from 10 to noon. But I am going to have Michael Letts on a regular basis. As you know, KMMU is Main Street Media Utah. We are Utah specific. We are much more about Utah, and we are about the concerns of Utah. Michael Letts is a national guest. I've actually had a number of people, a number of my audience love him. I've actually had other radio hosts reach out and say, "Wow, he's amazing. I need to get him on." I was on Republic Broadcasting Network, and the founder of that, John Stadmiller, who passed away almost a little over 2 years ago now, when he heard you on, he went, "Wow, this is big." He was actually feeling very negative towards the country, and he was quite negative towards law enforcement. I had you on, and I had on John Knox, who is Firefighters for Freedom down in LA. I had both of you on. After that show, he goes, "John, I now have faith for government within our nation because of number one, you, number two, John Knox, but really you." I mean, he was blown away with the things you said, and you came on initially on that show to talk to me about how you were not for forced vaccinations.
No.
And I don't know whether you've taken the clock shot or not. I'm not going to. Nope.
Never.
He just said no, folks. I told him I wasn't going to. He didn't let me finish. Michael, every once in a while, you got to let me finish so you don't get yourself in trouble with the powers that be. Okay. I was going to say you don't have to answer that. But we're saying but you also have said you don't want your brothers in blue to force. So that's one of the things that we've talked about is your brothers in blue all throughout the nation were taking those forced vaccinations, or they had to leave law enforcement. That happened all throughout the United States, unfortunately. So there's also, I bring you on to talk about most political things that are on the national level. How can I be delicate about this? So Michael Letts not only has a law enforcement background, but he has a background where he's touched the military and other organizations. I'm going to let Michael, if he ever wants to get into it a little bit more, go in more in depth, I'm going to let him take that. However, I will say this. I often get very good tips from Michael Letts. The cool thing about so I'm a commentator on the news slash journalist. Now, do I actually create anything new material? I've not yet to produce anything, but we're protected within being a commentator on the news, doing and having a radio show and a radio show host. I get the ability to be able to have people reach out to me, tell me things that are quote unquote not out in the public yet, maybe shouldn't be shared. Michael Letts has never done that, folks. Never, never. But I have gotten some very good information from Michael Letts. I will say this. I knew things about Uvalde, the Uvalde shooting down in Texas, and other shootings. I've known information, and he's known information. The day that it happens, he's like, John, just so you know, what you're hearing in the mainstream media is not the truth. And I can get verification of things along those lines and others. Now, there's one other thing that's cool about Michael Letts. Actually, there's two. There's a lot of cool things. There's a lot of cool things.
Keep going.
He's a manly man. He's got he's a wonderful human being that I've got to know over the last little over 2 years now. We've been interviewing one another, I want to say, for over 2 years. And then he happens to be a pastor, correct?
That's correct.
So you're a pastor, and you also have a very kind, wonderful, lovely wife who is so good to help you and help us connect from time to time. She's a wonderful human being. So I know to have good people in your life, you got to be doing good things. So Michael, that's my introduction to you, to the audience, of you to the audience. And I want to say thank you for joining me here today on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah.
Well, John, I appreciate it. It's always a privilege to be on your show. It's always a privilege to talk to your listeners. One of the things I must say, I appreciate very much that intro, but we appreciate you so much, John. And here's the reason why. Because with all the knowledge that one can possess, with all the knowings of the inner workings, it does absolutely no good if the people don't know and the people are not able to understand and to unite behind you into providing morals and values for the direction of this country. And that's the problem that we've been having over the last few generations, is we have mainstream media that everything is filtered through their lenses, and unfortunately their lenses are bought and paid for by operatives within government, such as the DNC and others. So they only want you to know what furthers their cause, not necessarily the truth. And what ultimately happens when that's the case is the American people are deceived and they're led down a path that leads to the destruction of this country. You are providing the voice for freedom to liberate those who are enslaved by the falsehoods that have occurred daily in this government now. And I thank you for being that piece.
For some reason, back in 2019, I had the owner of a radio station reach out to me, and he'd been chasing me for years to sell ad space for him. And I just said, I can't do it. I can't do it. I don't have time right now. And he called me one day in March in 2019 and said, hey, John, I'd like you to do a show. And I said, my friend, I'm sorry, I just don't have time right now to do sales for you. And he said, John, you didn't listen to what I said. I said, I want you to do a show. Man, it was a record scratching moment. And I went, My initial reaction, my friend, is to say no, but this is something I'm probably going to have to think about. So I prayed about it, thought about it, talked to my family, and we were able to squeeze it in. Um, just like you're sacrificing for your nation and your country. The time that you spend with Invest USA, bottom line is if you were to be spending that making money, you could be making a lot of money, especially with some things that you've got going on. Folks, he's got movies that he could be doing. He's got movie scripts that he could be out there selling and pushing. But he does a lot for Invest USA. He's got some other things, hopefully, that'll wind up coming and we'll be able to talk about in the future. But the bottom line is, Michael Letts is like so many of you, so many of us in the freedom and liberty movement, we're working on making things happen. Now, once again, I'm about liberty. My opinion of liberty over freedom. Freedom is you're able to do a thing. So, you know, I'm able to go out and drink a lot of alcohol tonight. Doesn't mean it's wise. With my family background, some of my family background, I've got addiction for alcoholism in my family background. My guess is if I was to start drinking a lot of alcohol, I'd become an alcoholic within a very short period of time. I may have the freedom to do it, but that definitely would take away my liberty. Liberty is the ability side, the spiritual side, and the morality side of freedom, in my opinion. Just because you have the ability and freedom to do a thing doesn't mean you should. And when you exercise liberty principles, you allow yourself to have true liberty and, bottom line, get closer to God. So we will wax religious from time to time. Both Michael and I do from time to time. We wax a little religious, and we will do that throughout our conversations from time to time. But let's get into a number of topics that are happening in the news. I want to get to. I'm going to throw you. I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to see if I can stump Michael Letts.
Go
And if
for
I
it.
stump Michael Letts, it's going to be my first time. So uh, I don't know if you heard about this news article. It was now it is in regards to. Now I'm pulling it out of the Gateway Pundit just because I'm pulling it up real quick. The headline says the jig is up. Exclusive local reporter describes election expert Halderman breaking into Dominion voting machine and changing vote totals during his Georgia testimony. This happened Friday.
Correct.
After,
I can give you all the details if you'd like.
that's me putting my phone down. I'm gonna pout. I'm gonna pout and hold my arms. No, go ahead, brother. I'm like I know. I'm sure he does. So, okay, brother, tell me let's get into it. So, in the Georgia trial, I think that okay. I'm going to set the stage for just this one thing, and I'm gonna let you take off. The cool thing is, this guy went over to the opposite sides councils. Went over to them and said, "Do you mind if I borrow a pen?" So they gave him a pen. He went up to the Dominion voting machine and flipped counts with their pen. I think that was awesome. Now, one thing I don't know about this, I wasn't able to find out if this is a jury trial or if this is just a judge that's watching it. But I'm going to shut up and say, Michael, tell us about this story because I think this story matters.
Well, the judge is watching it now, but it will be going to a jury case. But here's the issue: it comes all down to the case against President Trump and Dominion and the supposed election fraud that they're saying didn't happen in Georgia. And of course, let's give your listeners a little bit of background. In 2016, the election was held, and it was presumed. And of course, we have all kind of evidence of this. You know, everywhere from the FBI, Peter Strzok, his girlfriend Lisa, and the rest, all saying that Hillary was going to win 100 million to 1. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, Trump has declared the winner. And the reason why that happened, and you saw there were delays in that election, was it suddenly dawned on them that the American people were rejecting the liberal, idealistic principles and values of the Democratic Party because they don't have any values and principles. That was kind of a little bit of a jab at them. And because of that, they said that this is not where this country needs to head, and we're going to give it a new direction. And so it caught the whole Democratic operation off guard. They did not have enough time to make sure their plans, because they have been doing this for years, John. It is not a matter of this is something new. They've been doing it for decades. They've been rigging elections. They've become experts at it. Why do you think their whole agenda is what it is? Why do you think it's so important to keep open borders? We keep open borders because that way we have an influx of people coming across. Because all I need is your name, John. I put your name down, ship you on out. Now I've got a voter that I can fill out the mail in ballot for you, and I know exactly how you need to vote. And they can continue to do that for the millions that are crossing. So that gives them the padding that they need to be able to make sure that if their election is not going the way they need it to go in a particular area, they suddenly have difficulty with the counting, as you will recall in 2016 and 2020. Suddenly we have to pause the election counting because we had a water pipe burst or whatever it is that they may say. We'll come back to it a few hours later. What do they do during that process? They're making sure their tallies and their numbers are where they need to be because they miscalculate. So that contention has been made all along. In 2016, the President Trump won that election, totally caught him off guard. 2020, he was stronger than he was in 2016. He had more votes cast than has ever been cast for a president in history. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the swing state counts are suspended at midnight, and where he is winning by a large margin in some of these states. And by the next morning, suddenly he's losing.
I want to jump in real quickly. It wasn't just a few of the swing states, it was every single swing state that it was paused.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You're exactly right. And some others. I mean, they had to make it look good. And then, of course, suddenly he is lost, and Biden has 81 million votes cast for him, the most ever recorded anywhere. Interestingly enough, nobody ever saw him. Nobody saw any signs, any stickers, anything where these 81 million people come from. But of course, their reaction was well, they were just so fed up with the 4 years of Trump, nobody wanted to say anything. But then they secretly voted the way they wanted to and got Trump out. Trump took the position, and you said, why would he take this? Because it was obvious to the American people. Let me use some things that were said. First of all, in Pennsylvania, there were 1.5 million mail-in ballots sent out. There were 2.6 million that were returned. So you had 1.1 million more votes returned than you sent out. Now explain that one in any kind of a logic how that occurs, John, because they're not supposed to replicate themselves. So the way they pose this to the American people with the mainstream media is, oh, there's some discrepancies. We're going to get a recount. Don't worry, we're going to make sure the vote in the election was valid. The issue was not on the counting of the votes. It was the issue is were the votes that were counted legal. That question has never been settled and never been brought to a court for jurisdiction. When they raise those points, and what the court will say is, you don't have standing. How do you not have standing? It's a federal election. It's a presidential election. Just because you don't live in that state doesn't mean you don't have standing. Your name was on the ballot. That's a whole other separate issue. The second thing that the president said is, well, we have affidavits from workers that said the electronic voting system by Dominion can be altered and can be rigged. And of course, Dominion threw a fit. Oh, no, anybody that says that, that's slanderous. We're going to assume they did sue. You remember they sued Sidney Powell. They sued others for saying any kind of comment that perhaps the election wasn't fully validated and full of integrity. In Georgia, that case was those ballots were stopped. Suddenly, Georgia turned from being pro-Trump. At the last minute, 13,000 votes, I believe it was, or 11,000 votes, were won for Biden. He won by 11,000 votes. So Trump raised the question. Again, we see duplicity, We see ballots that were counted that were not properly recorded under Georgia's law, and we think that the Dominion system can be rigged and changed, and we want to challenge it. Well, they said that was, what did the mainstream media holler about? Oh, he's being a sore loser. He's trying to find every way he can to be a dictator and continue his presidency. He won't accept the facts. None of that's true. President Biden came out and said this was the most uh, honest election this country has ever had. Now, suddenly, 3 years later, in this particular case, you remember they're saying that President Trump called right after the election, talked to the election commissioners and talked to the Secretary of State, challenging what had the information that had been given to him that, hey, you need to look into this. There are discrepancies. We think there needs to be not a recount, an investigation of the legality of those votes. We find out that both the governor, who, by the way, let me give you a little information here. The governor's family works for, he has family members that work for Dominion. Okay.
Okay, so real quickly, the governor. The governor?
Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. Brian Kemp has family members that work for Georgia. I work for Dominion. The Secretary of State, we discovered now, has refused to allow records and has been destroying records, voting records. Remember, he's supposed to be Republican and want to make sure that the election is full of integrity. I don't know why you would be denying evidence and trying to destroy evidence if you didn't have anything to hide. But the real kicker came Friday when the question was raised. All these votes are accurate. They were done on a voting machine. The Dominion system is without blemish. It is one of the most honest, greatest integrity systems in the world. And so this expert said, okay, if that's the case, let's do an election now. We will vote for John versus Michael. John gets 50 votes. Michael gets 50 votes. You see, that's what the screen says. Give me a pen. Bang, within a matter of seconds. I got 100 votes, John. You got 0. And how simple it was to do. And so the question was, if your statement is legit, that this is the most secure system, the most integrity operated system in the world, how did we just do that? And if I can do it in seconds with a pen, how can not anybody else do it who has any knowledge of what's going on?
And here in the state of Utah, over $1 million was spent on a public campaign on billboards and other media for the lieutenant governor who is over the elections, and for the governor to put out an ad campaign that this was the most secure election ever.
You know, that it's amazing how devious and how sinister the other side is.
Methinks thou dost protest too much.
Well, the reason why I say it's so sinister is you look at Rudy Giuliani, who happened to be one of Trump's attorneys at the time. You look at all the people who said, just raise the question. I think Dominion's machines, based on the evidence that we're hearing from experts, are not subject to being able to be challenged and tampered with. And they were sued for hundreds of millions of dollars. Fox came out and said, rather than go to court, we'll pay Dominion. What was it, $500 million or something along those lines?
Something along those lines, yeah.
To get out of the situation. And now we discover all along that what Trump said was true. The machines are very manipulable and can easily change. Now, you'd look a little obvious in the illustration I use for Trump to suddenly get 0 and Biden to get all 100. So they kind of mixed it in a little bit there. Biden, instead of 50-50, maybe Biden got 80-20 or something along those lines. But he could manipulate the figures any way he chose with a pen in a matter of seconds. And that's why you had to have the break in the counts. Remember, everything was being counted as supposed to be up till about midnight. Suddenly, they're beginning to see the numbers are not looking the way that they want them to look to be able to defeat Trump. So suddenly in all these swing states, we've got problems. We got voting machines down, or we have water breakage. It's going to have to shut down the counting center, or this or that. And they took about 6 to 8 hours. Then they came back online. And when they came back online, suddenly the numbers had been reversed. And their position was, oh, well, you have to understand, we have all these absentee ballots or mail in ballots that we hadn't got around to counting yet. Now, once we've counted them, this is the actual reflection, and it is what it is. Biden is just blowing Trump away. But we're finding out now that what he said all along, that our election system sucks. It is the least integrity election system in the world. Why is that? Because the old ways, John, are the best ways. You walk in, you show an ID, photo ID that you are John. I hand you a ballot. You fill it out. You put it back. It's sealed, and we count them at the end of the day. Now that's the way we don't make mistakes. Why I say we don't make mistakes is I don't just count them. You get like 5 people that go back behind you to make sure they were all counted correctly. That's the way this country's been done all these years. When you begin to use electronics, Dominion and others, and you access where they can get on the internet or where they have wireless signals, it's easy to go in and manipulate the results. Or the other thing that they have been good at, which they use COVID-19. Oh, it's too worrisome. You may get a disease if you go out to the polls. So we're going to shut down the polls. We're just going to send everybody a mail-in ballot. And what they don't tell you, John, you say, why does that become an issue? Is because they take the voter registration list from all the way back 20 years ago. So your address, John, you may have had 5 people that lived there before you lived there. You're going to get 5 or 6 mail-in ballots all to the same address. Now, when that happens, they don't say, oh, these 5 no longer live there, throw them away. Nah, they fill out all 6 of them, send them all back, and now they've got, or the election parties know well enough that there's 6 people on your list that shouldn't be there, and they fill them out for you. And it's hard to be able to control that when they're mail-in ballots like that. That's why they have ballot stuffing. That's why we saw tapes, evidence across the country. These people would come up to a drop-off ballot, not with their ballot, with boxes full, thousands, tens of thousands, and dump them all in a box at midnight, 2 a.m., and take off. How can that not lead people to question the integrity of an election? But that's where we're at in this particular situation. So what is occurring now? Their whole packaging is falling apart, John. On their liberal, idealistic side, they said that, our voting is above board, best in the country. We're saying now that's a lie. We're saying our borders are secure. The people coming across are benefiting this country. It's a great privilege to be open armed and compassionate and have the rest of the world come to us. We find out the truth of the matter is these open borders are bringing across fentanyl, human sex trafficking, terrorists, criminals, and the list goes on and on. And then the few that don't meet those qualifications, the government is encouraging them to come across. And why are they doing that? Because remember, everyone that comes across, they get that name and they can fill out a mail-in ballot for them and get their own comfortable electoral base. And so, but how are they incentivizing them? Well, you and I are paying for that. If you come across the border, I give you $2,500 a month in taxpayer money subsistence. I give you a ticket anywhere you want to go. We pay for your transportation. I give you free medical care. I give you a phone, and the list goes on and on. And the tragic part about that is ask a veteran whether he gets the same kind of treatment, who sacrificed his life, his service, his family to defend this country. Ask them whether they get the same treatment from our government. The answer is without a doubt.
And it's even worse than that. So let's pile on a little bit more. Now they're going to be asking those veterans in many states, and I think that we may hear this call go throughout the nation. Hey, we actually want you veterans to now house those along with others, not just the veterans, but we want you to house them in your own homes.
They're already making those calls all across the country. They're saying, and why are they doing that? Because they're getting such a pushback and outrage from the American citizens. What is their outrage? Let me tell you what they're doing in New York, and they're not just New York. They're doing this across the country. All these illegals are coming in. Texas knows good and well they can't handle them all. So they're shipping them out to all these states who said they were sanctuary states and that they had great compassion. Send them to us. We'll take care of them. We're not stuck up like the rest of y'all. We'll take care of these people. Well, they found out that when you have to take care of when you're offering all these services, you realize, John, we're spending over 400 billion a year is what it's costing this country in providing aid and comfort to the illegal immigrants in this country. We're paying over 400 billion to people who are breaking the law.
And
And
let's throw this in. So I want to go down this path just a little bit. I
sure,
also want let's also get to the Supreme Court decision that just
sure,
happened. Since you and I spoke, the Supreme Court decision came across. So
right,
let's be clear. I remember over the last many years, over the last several, in fact, last decade, uh, that the blue states and blue cities were lambasting all conservatives. How dare you not want to welcome migrants, quote unquote, migrants into, and let's be clear on what they are. They're illegal aliens
that's correct.
crossing the border. And, we should let them in. We're sanctuary states, we're sanctuary cities. Well, the Illinois governor last week came out and said, rotten, evil Texas Governor Greg Abbott, you're the problem. You're busing hundreds of people a day to our state from the border. It is evil of you. We can't afford this. And I went, what? I mean, it was like another record scratching moment. Are you kidding me? Your state, and I guarantee you, he ran on this. This was one of his issues. Was we're a welcoming state. I guarantee you, he said that at least once throughout his campaign. Now he's saying, "How dare you send them up our way?" And he says hundreds. There's there's 10,000 people plus that we know, not the never counteds, not
Right,
the gotaways, the ones they found, the ones they've processed.
correct.
They're getting 10,000 a day coming um, through Texas. Many days they have over 10,000 people come in, and he's complaining that he's got over 100. Now Texas never said, "Hey, illegal immigrants, please come in here. We want you to come, and I'll come in." No. What are they supposed to do? And then you whine and complain, you snivelly, whiny little coward, over a couple hundred people a day being shipped from Texas coming up to your state. That's ridiculous. Oh, and let's not forget Martha's Vineyard when they sent up. Now, okay, Mayor Mike Adams is saying, "Hey, we're going to need some of you New Yorkers. We're going to need you to house some of these people to come into your home." And also, the governor for New York is starting to say that. I noticed she didn't say that when at Martha's Vineyard, all those people were sent up there. And those people have plenty of room up in Martha's Vineyard. They have like second and third and fourth homes,
Right,
dwellings that they could be putting people in, not their main little mansion, but their third or fourth location on their property. They have multiple little homes where people will come and stay. They didn't offer that up. No, they were like, "Hey, thanks for coming. We're shipping you out of here as fast as we can."
no, you're exactly right, John. What is so funny about Martha's Vineyard? Why were they so upset? Because of the fact that they couldn't, from a national uh, PR image, appear that they didn't care and weren't going to take care of them. However, if you've ever tried to rent a room, a hotel room, or a place to stay in Martha's Vineyard versus trying to rent one at the Days Inn, you'll see there's a substantial difference in cost. And here's what we're talking about costing $400 billion a year. See, they've agreed to take care of it. They won't put any of them out on the street. I'm just stating their position. They won't let them be out on the street. They won't let them be. They don't mind our veterans doing that, but they let these illegal immigrants do that. So when they come to these places, they have to find a place to put them. So that means they go to the hotels. Well, the hotels are not going to give up their rooms for free. Why would they? They don't even give them a discount. They charge full government rate for each one of these rooms, and they're getting paid by the government, whether it's state government, local government, or the federal government. Now, the federal government has realized how contentious this issue is, and they have to get funding from Congress. That ain't going anywhere anytime soon anymore. So that now falls on the state and local governments. They have to fund these expenses, to feed them, to house them, etc. And that's where they're coming back now and churning on their own philosophy. And Eric Adams being one is telling Joe Biden, we can't afford this anymore. You're bankrupting New York City. But I was
As soon
trying to
as he
make
started to trumpet that real hard, he had some people come out of the woodwork saying he's not such a good guy. He was
correct.
evil, and I think he had a few women come after him, if I remember correctly. The story goes.
That is correct. That is correct. So you see how the whole issue, their philosophy, is just destroying everything this country ever stood for, and that is why it's become such a major issue across this country and in Utah. And let's pick up a little bit about what's close to home here. We just had a case a couple days ago right next door to you in Colorado. Jose Manuel. He's got a lot longer surname than that, but that is his Mexican name, his legal name. Came across 4 times in this country. First time he came across, he has a great problem with alcohol, evidently. He got nailed for DUI. Okay, now, he didn't have a license or anything. You'd think it'd be more than that, but got nailed for DUI. Here's how it works: he goes in, he's arrested for DUI. He goes to the bond hearing. They give him a bond or a PR bond at that stage for the first time. He is bonded out, but then ICE comes and picks him up and they deport him and send him back across the river. So, because of the fact it's stamped that he was given to the federal government, that case is basically gone. I mean, they don't even keep track of it. They take it out of the system. He turns right around and comes back. Second time, gets another DUI. Same thing happens. It doesn't go on his record. It's expunged because he's been sent and deported again. Third time, same thing, another DUI. He gets deported, record's gone, goes back. Comes back in the fourth time. This time on the DUI, though, he kills a mother and her son because he crashed into him with drunk driving. Now they're still holding him, but they understand that if he's got a $250,000 bond. Why is it so high? Because they understand that if they make it low enough and he meets bond, he won't face any punishment. He'll be deported again. Remember, when they deport him, they don't send him to a prison in Mexico. They just send him back across the river. And then he'll come back and do it a fifth time. So this shows you how broken the system is and how
What
much is.
should we do with Michael? What do you think we should do with people like that?
Well, I think we've got a number of different factors. First of all, if you're here illegal, we need to make sure you're gone. You go back. But if you commit a crime before we get to you and you're illegal, we're going to punish you. We're going to give a sentence. However, instead of determining that we, the taxpayers, have to put him up, he has two options. Either his government pays for the cost of keeping him here, or his family does, or we send him back to a prison in his country. Now, once they've got him, he doesn't want to be in a Mexican prison. I can
Oh
promise you
no,
that.
guarantee you he doesn't. He doesn't want any part of that.
Just like any other prisons, it's amazing. Prisons in any other country, they're not a place you want to be. Prisons in America are kind of like, yeah, well, not bad. I'll take it.
My guess is even the worst prisons in the United States are better than most Mexican prisons.
There's no question. But people have to be held accountable for their actions. The first action they have to be held accountable for is illegally entering this country. And quite frankly, that is why people get a little upset with me sometimes that I'm being a little harsh. That one of the first things we need to do with a change of administration, and what happened with this one, this liberal bastion that we have, I don't call it a presidency, I call it a residency in the White House. But when we have a real president who has values and principles, we have got to go in and round up every illegal immigrant in the country. And people say, are you not being a little harsh? Well, here's the reason why you have to do that. We allowed all these millions to come in unvetted. We have no idea which ones are terrorists, which ones are hardened criminals that have been released from their country. Why would they not release them? You go to America, you're
Okay,
out of my hair.
let's dive down on that just a little bit. We know for a fact, I want to say in Venezuela, they released people out of prison and they sent them to the United States. People in countries in Central and South America have emptied their prisons and sent the people to the United States. I've told them, go.
Unfortunately, it's not just that. We've got them traced now in prisons in the Middle East, prisons in Africa, prisons in Europe. I mean, it's kind of like we've got a big sign saying how stupid we are. If you have prisoners, don't worry about you having to pay for them to take care of them and incarcerate them. Send them over here to us. We'll be glad to take them. And if they get in trouble again, then our taxpayers will be glad to accommodate them in a little a prison term if we don't deport them. But if we do deport them, then by all means, send them back over the second time. They can get right back in with no issues, no problems. See, I think people don't understand how our immigration system is supposed to work, John. The way the immigration system is supposed to work, we are open armed with the Statue of Liberty for people who want to either have a better life or who are escaping hardships. What I mean by that is political hardships, uh, torture, etc. It's called asylum. But the way the system works is if you fall in that category, you submit the paperwork to the United States. A review is done. If your documentation backs up your claims, then you are giving a hearing before an immigration court, and they determine whether you have the right to declare political asylum and come into this country. Now, that's the way it's supposed to work. How is it working? First of all, we have open borders, so you don't even have to go through any of that. Just walk across where there's nobody at and keep trucking. And once you're in this country, you go anywhere you want to go. And don't worry about getting caught, because worst that could happen if you get caught is they'll keep you in jail for a couple of days, send you back, and then you just walk across the river the next day, do it all over again. Worst case scenario. So that's but the other way that they're doing is, okay, I'll go across at a point of entry. That's what we call them, the point of entries. And I'll tell them, and remember, this is where we have 10 to 20,000 a day crossing a point of entry. And they're coming in and saying, I need political asylum. This administration is not saying, did you fill out the paperwork? By the way, you can't stay here until we give you initial clearance that you even qualify, that you could even be heard. You have probable cause, is what we call it, for political asylum. Because all they do is when you come across, you say, I want asylum. Great. We can't process you now. We're overwhelmed. Where were you headed to? I'm headed to Utah. Great.
Utah is one of the places that they mentioned that they're coming to when they've been recorded. Hey, where are you going? Utah is one of the main places they say they're coming to.
See, they say we'll give you a ticket, give you a Visa card with $2,500 on it for incidentals, give you a free phone. You got medical. If you need anything, just go to whatever local emergency room you need to go to. Taxpayers will pay for it. You're set. Head on out. By the way, when you get to Utah, look up where the closest immigration office is at, and stop by and tell them that you're there. You'd like to have a hearing for the court to determine your cause, whether you have probable cause for asylum.
What are the I think you've given me a percentage on how many actually do that, though. Roughly, what are those percentages?
Less than 1% that actually do that. Okay. The rest of them just say, sure, I'll be glad to do that as soon as I get there. They don't think about it another second once they're gone. And here's the problem. The 1%, less than 1% that are honest, shall we say, that do it, when they go in and ask for a hearing, an immigration hearing, here's what they hear. Is, okay, 7 years from now, we've got an opening. You're booked for 7 years from now. Call us, when it gets closer to that time, we'll make sure it's still on. Well, most people can't remember what they're going to do for tomorrow. So in 7 years, they don't remember they've got an immigration hearing. It never happens. That's why we have to round up every single illegal immigrant, and we have to vet them. We have to know what their background is. Are you here because you were released from prison? We're supposed to be housing you as a criminal? Are you here because you have terrorist ties and you're going to destroy this country? Are you just here because you think you're drug running? Are you here because you're helping the sex trafficking program? Or are you here because you want to make a better lifestyle? And I can tell you on all the other four categories first, they need to be put in shackles and sent back to where they came from. On the fifth one, we've got to decide what we're going to do as a country, John.
Let me ask you this. My liberal friend chatted in my ear, as it were. You said 10 to 20,000. Now, if I remember correctly, there's never been a day that the official records stated by the government that there has been 20,000 people. So why do you make the claim that there have been tens and 20s of thousands of people that have crossed that border? Why do you feel you can justify making that claim? And I think this is important because this audience may or may not have heard this.
Official record for last month in December, Now remember, this is ones coming into the point of entry. These are not the gotaways. These are not the ones that. And how do we know that there's more than just coming from the point of entry? We have drones, electronic systems all across the border. We see thousands of them coming into various breaks in our system. But do we have agents there to greet them? Of course not. So we know that they're coming through and not even being processed. Just through the point of entry, we had 320,000 through Texas alone last month.
So that is just right off the top of my head. That's a little bit more than 10,000 a day. Now,
Correct.
so I appreciate you pointing out. So there's drones and other electronic detection systems that we know people go through that were never caught and never processed on the border. Okay.
Much more than what we see going through the points of entry. I've been down there on the border. I've been with the law enforcement. I've watched those drone videos. I see. I mean, it is literally looks like New York City. You ever see how crowded their streets are? Pouring across these breaks all over the place, just constantly pouring across.
Well, let's get into the Supreme Court decision. I want to pull this up real quickly for those of our audience that are not aware of this decision. And unfortunately, this happened after our show yesterday that we did. In the Supreme Court granted Biden's emergency request in a 5-4 decision. Roberts and pardon me, Barrick sided with the Biden administration that they can go ahead and take down those fences. Now, it's a temporary injunction. Apparently, there's going to be a full hearing or something along those lines. So it's not done. But I'm very disappointed in. Well, I'm not surprised at all by Roberts. Amy Barrett, I am very surprised. I'm surprised in her, and obviously Biden or Trump didn't make the right decision because there was, I believe, I want to say a Cuban lady that was also up for nomination from Florida, and that's who we should have put in. And I'll bet you she wouldn't have done it.
You're exactly right. To give your listeners and viewers a little bit of a background, here's the dilemma. Here's what's going on. The Constitution thinks that protecting American citizens against terrorist attacks is so important that it was put into the preamble of the Constitution. The preamble says that the role of the federal government is to provide for the common defense. That's about as clear and as simple as you can make it. Make sure that our people are protected from harm. Now, that is in the preamble besides being within the Constitution. That's the role of the federal government.
Let me read right out of the Constitution of the United States. As you said, the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect human union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility. I think by having all those illegals come in, that's been crossed off.
It's been tossed off.
And provide for the common defense. And providing for the common defense, I'm seeing an invasion down on the southern border.
And that's the key, the word you just used, because in the Constitution under Clause 3, it also says, what is Clause 3? And Clause 3 talks about in the Constitution the role of states, okay, what kind of authority that they have. And here's what it basically says. I'm giving you a condensed version. States don't have the right to create their own armies. They don't have the right to create their own trade agreements with foreign governments or whatever it is, whatever agreements they have. That all is done on the federal level. But there's a provision in that same clause. The last part of that provision says, unless states are in imminent danger of invasion or feel like the actions will cause irreparable harm. Now, what part of an invasion do you not get that's happening on our border now? And what part of irreparable harm is not being done to this country? Because when you are allowing, as we have documented, this is not hyperbole, this is not my opinion. We have documentation that thousands that have crossed are on the terrorist watch list or are terrorists, okay? And we have documentation that ammunition, that explosives have been coming across the border. We picked up 10 IEDs alone last week, crossing from the southern border, coming down from the northern border too, quite frankly. Okay, and then the third thing that for terrorism to succeed is you have to have money. We were able to thwart that during the last administration because, quite frankly, Trump kept Iran broke. We put an embargo and we froze all their assets. But since then, under the Biden administration, they have received $250 billion, taxpayer dollars from Americans. So they're flush with cash and they're able to finance and pay for every bit of terrorism they want across the world. So we've given the perfect recipe for terrorist attacks on this soil. Terrorist attacks are not meant to cause people to, oh, that was not nice. They're meant to destroy, they're meant to maim, they're meant to hurt the American people. So tell me, if you're setting up the ability for the American people to be hurt, how does that coincide with your oath of office to defend, provide for the common defense? It doesn't. So here was the
I,
case.
I,
Texas said, you're supposed to provide for the common sense. We recognize the Constitution gives immigration to the federal government, okay? But it also says, as part of immigration, you're supposed to provide for the common defense. You're not doing it. We're asking you, we're pleading with you to do it. You're not doing it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to exercise what's in the Constitution, our right to sovereignty, because of the fact there is an imminent invasion coming that will do irreparable harm to the American people. And we're going to use our assets for our state, Texas, and block their ability to hurt the American people. We're going to put up wire, razor wire. We're going to send the National Guard with shields and with whatever's necessary. You don't come across with them and say, hey, I'm here. Where are you going to send me to? What they're going to do is tell you, you're here. We're sending you right back across. You don't stay. And so what did the federal government do? They immediately challenged a suit. You can't do that because it is our responsibility for the federal government to enforce immigration. The response from the state of Texas, we're not arguing the constitutionality of what your job is. What we're saying is, if you refuse or you abdicate your responsibility in your job, then it is our right under the Constitution to do it ourselves and to defend ourselves. And that's black and white, John. And how in the world that Amy Barrett and John Roberts got that wrong is just extremely disappointing. Is beyond me.
well, Roberts always seems to decide, and Amy Cohen Barrett, definitely John Roberts has a tendency to side with the federal government. Amy Cohen Barrett, I'm starting to see that too, that she sides with the federal government much more often than she sides with the states. Okay, so I'm going to bottom line this. This is my opinion. What I would love to see Abbott do, and what I'd love to see, if I was the governor of the state of Utah, I would send a bunch of, let's put it this way, I would send a bunch of our Utah Guard down to the Texas border and say, I stand with, and in fact, I'd go down there myself. I'd fly down there myself. I'd grab Utah One or whatever it is, and I'd fly down there myself, and I'd say, I am here to side with Governor Abbott, and our Utah State Guard is down here to defend our border. Article 1, I believe it's Section 9. I'm going to read right out of, I'm opening it, flipping through my Constitution here, folks, real quickly. And I'm getting to the last part of, excuse me, Section 10. It states, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty, tonnage, blah, 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 keep troops or ships of war in times of peace, enter into any agreement upon or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless,
this is the key right here,
unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. And the bottom line is, people are, we know we have we have good people coming across the border, right? I
We assume that,
understand there's
John.
some
We
over
don't know
here,
that. We assume that there are some good
but,
people.
but we I'm going to say, I guarantee you, out of all of them, there's some good people coming across, but there's still one breaking the law. Now, I once had a friend tell me, well, John, it's a misdemeanor. It's like getting a traffic ticket. Guess what happens? You don't pay that traffic ticket, you wind up getting put in jail. I know people that have not paid their traffic ticket, and a warrant was put out for their arrest, and they wound up going to jail.
Right.
Two, we also don't know every single one of them. We know that we have MS-13. MS-13 here in the state of Utah. We have them here. They've been put in jail and they've only been kept for 72 hours and released. How do we know this? The mayor of Riverton was told by the director of ICE for the state of Utah that that was happening. So we have MS-13 gang members. I guarantee we have other gang members. We know that, and the bottom line is we don't know all the bad people. We've got to process them and not let them come in. On top of that, Michael Yon, and I've had other former special forces individuals say, down in Austin, Texas, I have seen military-aged men, Chinese men, out running as a small unit in groups of like 4 and 6. They were military aged. They were acting like a military unit, out running around, exercising.
We've got
To me,
40,000 of them documented that we've come across, John. In fact, we did an investigation in Venezuela. Okay. I think I mentioned this on the air before, where we sit down, investigative reporters, and law enforcement personnel. And in the outskirts of Caracas, okay, there is a compound where it is owned and operated by the Chinese government, where literally every day ships are coming in with transports of military age Chinese young men from, say, 18 to 40. They go to the compound. They are trained there for 3 days. When I mean trained, they already have military training. They're basically briefed and given their assignments. Then they are placed in the caravans, is what they call them, that are coming up to the United States. We've documented 40,000. Remember, we only documented a small percentage of the ones that have actually got here. So that's 40,000 that you now have in the United States that we know of. We also know that there's another 20,000 that have stopped in Panama. You say, what's the significance? Well, as you will recall, at one point in time, we paid for, we own the Panama Canal, okay, which is of extremely military significance and strategic importance for our naval fleets to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Cuts off days for being able to response time, all right? We also know now that under Jimmy Carter, we gave that away. Obama finalized it. Not only Jimmy Carter gave it away and said, okay, we're going to give it to you, but we get a lease. We pay so much a year for X number of years so that we can still have the right to use it at any point in time we want to. Obama terminated that lease. It is now owned by the Panamanian government. Panamanian government is very unstable. Okay. So when the Panamanian government collapses, who do you think is going to take over control of the Panama Canal? How do you think it's going to affect our
it will.
military operations?
My guess right now is there's a very good chance. Well, we know that the Chinese are very involved in the Panama Canal and running it right now. My guess is that's who's going to wind up taking it over, unless there's military actions taken by the United
So
States,
there's 20,000
when
people,
that collapse
20,000
happens.
military age personnel down there right now that we've identified in Panama. What does
Right?
Panama need 20,000 Chinese soldiers down there for? What do we need 40,000
I
in
would
this
say
country? You remember China also has police stations in this country. Now we've talked about that on your show before.
yes.
Um, so you,
Okay, now wait a minute. Record scratchy moment for some of our viewers and listeners. I guarantee you, we've just had a record scratching Police stations? Come on. Chinese police
Correct.
stations? Michael, you're way overblowing
There
it.
are 13 of them as of the last count, and we haven't counted in a little while. New York, LA, other locations. And here's what they do. You say, how did you know they're Chinese police stations? Near American police stations, city police stations, within a block or two, they will rent a building. They send over agents, Chinese agents that have their full credentials, Chinese credentials now, Chinese police. We know they're Chinese police because their badges say they are, their credentials do. And they will then go around in the Chinese community and they will intimidate, interrogate any people they think are dissidents from China. They use it to be that close to the NCIS system so they can hack in and access records that they normally couldn't do. They are, yes, we have identified 13 stations. One of them we shut down. The Justice Department got such flack over doing nothing that they eventually issued indictments. Here was the sad part about that question. They issued indictments against the police officers, the Chinese police officers that were there. Before they could serve them, they were tipped off. They went back to China and they sent a whole new contingency. So that's new people. They weren't indicted. So it continues to be in operation as of today.
Um, where's our FBI? Oh yeah, that's right. They're going after January
I was
6th
going to say
people.
they're busy, John. They're taking care. They're trying to find out who was on the sidewalks. Forget if you were around the Capitol. If you were anywhere in D.C. at the time, they want to know what you were doing in the Capitol on January the 6th.
They've got the air marshals following. So we're going to get, I want to deviate real quickly. They're using air marshals to find people that were involved in January 6th. And how do we know this? One instance, I'm just going to mention one story that's out there. Uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure you're familiar with this situation. There was a air marshal individual that had to announce, and I want to say it was air marshal. It could have been TSA. I could be. It's one of
He
those
was an
two.
air marshal.
Air marshal. He was on flight with his wife. He was off duty. He had to say, "Hey, here's my badge. I've got my sidearm." And another air marshal agent came up and just said, "By the way, I happen to be here because I'm following your wife because she was there on January 6th in Washington D.C."
Correct. That is a correct story. That is accurate.
Am I am I blowing anything out of
No,
proportion?
you're exactly, and not just that. I mean, that's tragic enough. What really is tragic to me is I have many friends in the bureau who are working on human sex trafficking, child sex trafficking cases, who were ordered off of those cases and placed on. Now I'm quoting the director Christopher Wray. Who were placed on the largest investigation the FBI has ever undertaken, and that is the January 6th.
Not child sex trafficking that we know we have millions here in the United States.
Exactly, and making millions and billions of dollars off of it. That's not of no concern to the FBI. The concern is the biggest case they've ever had. Were you in D.C. on the 6th, and were you in any way had any thoughts that you didn't like what the government was doing? That's what they want to know.
And even if you're not in DC on January 6th, we'll throw you in jail
Yeah,
too
they've
if you
expanded
supported
it.
some. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit towards let's cover a little bit of Epstein and child sex trafficking. To me, I've stated this before. Right now in the United States, I think the greatest evil that we have and we need to wash away from us is child sex trafficking. To me, it is the biggest sin. It's even bigger than abortion. At least with abortion, those children, may the Lord forgive me if I'm wrong. And Michael, I hope you will forgive me if I'm wrong when we meet on the other side and I find out I'm wrong. But in my opinion, at least with abortion, the child is innocent and they go back to
That's
God.
correct.
Got it, Dwayne. They go back to God. Here, those children with those children are, what would be the proper term? they're left. The children that are being trafficked, the women that are being trafficked. I want to mention this something and something that popped into my mind when you were talking about the Chinese. There's also female Chinese that are coming
That's true.
across. When they come up in those caravans, okay, something that happens in those caravans when they're going up, when they're going across, I believe they're NGOs, non-governmental organizations, give women free, uh, what is the proper term? They give them the pill
Right.
to keep them from having
Right.
from getting.
Mhm.
They give them contraceptives, but they also give them the pill. Why? Because they know on average they're raped multiple times on their way up into the United States. What do we know about those women that are
They're not
Chinese?
touched.
They're never touched.
There's a reason why.
If it's a Chinese woman, go ahead. What's
There's a
that?
reason why. If you take a look, China has the largest number of females in its military. So when we say there are 40,000 Chinese males, military age, understand they are sending just as many females, and they are highly trained. People don't understand that communist China is totally different than the United States. They don't have an all volunteer force. Okay, you are compelled to serve, or you don't live. And they have almost as many women as they do men. Remember, they have the largest by far military personnel anywhere in the world.
Okay. Real quickly, I want to mention that Michael is more than willing to take call-ins. Now, like I said, we've got a lot of ground to cover, but I would really like to give one thing about Main Street Media. Uh, we want to give Utahns a voice. We want to be. This is a streaming internet radio program. We want to give Utah the voice. We also, frankly, are more than willing to take calls from people outside of Utah. But our on-air line is 385-899-2134. That's 385-899-2134. So just about anything that's happening when it comes to law enforcement, Myarchus, anything along those lines, Michael can fill just about anything when it comes to the border, police issues, FBI, Merrick Garland. Um, we
CIA.
they're CIA. And things along those lines. So I want to get back to Epstein. So Epstein we know that he had, we had a residence in New York.
Correct. One.
He had a residence. Pardon me.
One of many. He had residents all over the world.
I'm going to name some of the ones that I know. And if I remember, I think you're going to remind me, hey, John, I think there's a few that you're forgetting. So the ones that I remember right off the top of my head, New York. Also, another one that is commonly known is the one in the Florida Keys. One that's not very well known is the one in New Mexico. Funny thing that was going on in New Mexico is actually there was they were working on shall we say coming up with children. I'm gonna not go too far into that one. And then also, if I remember correctly, there was France. I want to say there was one in England, and I want to say there was one in Germany. Am I leaving? Am I wrong on any of those?
You're not wrong any of those. You left a few out, but let's just say it expands to most of the world.
Okay.
Especially in the Middle Eastern countries as well.
Then he happened to have, it was outside the United States that if I remember correctly, it was outside the United States that a passport was found with a different name, one of his passports, as well. It was a Saudi Arabian address.
Correct.
We know that the Israeli intelligence often came to these different locations. The FBI was aware of them. Now, when the Florida house was raided, and I can't remember if it was both the Florida and New York house was raided, there were things in a safe that were not declared within the warrant. Now, had that been a J6er, I guarantee you they would have sat on that and they would have taken the evidence and still left.
They would take it
But
anyway.
they took pictures of it and then returned in a couple of days with
It was
another
gone.
warrant. Guess what? The stuff was gone. So we have many police officers that have said, "Hey, we've seen information, we've seen videos that have disappeared. We know what we're on some of these underage trafficking of children, young children, not the late teenagers that you hear about." So the bottom line is, I'm going to say this: I believe MI6 was involved. I believe CIA was involved, and I believe Israeli intelligence was involved, and probably a few others. Since they were in France and in Germany, I'm gonna guess they were probably involved somehow and knew what was going on. An intelligence asset. Your thoughts on what happened with Epstein? Am I completely off base on that? And then we might even want to get into a little bit on January 6th. Man, still so many other things that we could get into. Iran, Qatar, but we may not get into that. We've covered election integrity a little bit. We briefly hit on vaccinations and stuff like that. But what are your thoughts on when it comes to Epstein? What are some of the evils that we've seen? Oh, and by the way, the list has come out, but it's not like been tons of information that has come out on that black book, huh?
The list has come out, is still redacted. Okay, it is very slowly. So you're throwing out a few names here, a few names there. And again, we have to put it in the larger perspective of where does all this lead and why are we talking about all this? You have a determined set of people, shall we say, who want to make sure that they have ultimate control, not just of this country, but they want to have world dominance. There's always been the issue of having a one world order. That's not a conspiracy. I mean, that's well documented. People are now coming out publicly and talking about having a one world order. And in order to be able to do that, they have to be able to control people. Well, it's kind of hard to control people on a world scene when one of your most powerful countries used to be, I'm not saying we still are, but used to be one of the most powerful countries in the world, was a bastion of democracy and freedom. And so they have to do everything they can to destroy that so that it all falls into place. So they're using all these things. They're using election fraud to make sure that they can maintain power, get power, and maintain power. They're weaponizing, once they have power, they're weaponizing it and politicizing the federal law enforcement agencies to be able to be like the old Gestapo and go out and keep people in line that perhaps are starting to raise too many questions. But the other thing they have to do is they have to be able to control the elected officials until they can remove the ones that don't support them and replace them with people that will do their bidding. What better way to do that, John, than with blackmail? You see, Epstein's operation was not a mom and pop shop, okay? That was one of the most elaborate organizations in the world. Now, with all due respect to Epstein, he's not that smart. So they put together a conglomerate, including our government, CIA, FBI. You say, how do you know that? Are you just spouting off at the mouth? No, let me give you something that's undisputed. See, Jeffrey Epstein got caught, or somebody doing their job, okay, in the FBI to prevent child sex trafficking at the time, discovered the network that Epstein had. And instead of asking permission, etc., just moved on it, had him arrested. That happened in Florida. Once it was arrested, there was a paper trail. So the court had to do something with it. So as the trial began to prepare, the evidence would begin to be gathered. Suddenly, someone intervened. And I'm going to tell you who that someone was. Someone intervened, and a plea bargain was offered. Now, remember, he wasn't caught with a picture. These were some very horrific crimes that had been committed. Something that we wouldn't offer any plea deal to anybody for. But he was offered a plea deal. No time, no anything. Basically expunging his record. The person involved with that case was just recently asked, How did that happen? He was very blunt. Another federal government agency got involved and intervened on his behalf. Well, we know who that agency was. It was the CIA. So you see, they have put this together and used Epstein as their centerpiece. And what is it that they're looking for? Well, when they put together this kind of an operation and they put people of power in compromising situations, and you remember there are hundreds of thousands of hours of tapes that have been yet to be revealed for what went on the Epstein Island. Because all they have to do is say, I got you on tape. So a couple things I need. I need my budget increased. I need you to appoint this person here, and I need that. And by the way, if you have any question about whether you want to do that or not, this stuff will be released within an hour.
Okay, so I want to back you up a little bit, and I'm going to draw a little bit of a picture here on how that happens. I'm getting that liberal friend of mine jabbering in my ear. I can hear him right now saying, Michael Letts is just blowing smoke. Well, let me bring a real world situation that happened here in the United States not too long ago that I bet a number of the people within our audience will remember. So I've got the article pulled up. I've got two articles on this. Representative Barney Frank of Massachusetts said today that without his knowledge, a male prostitute he hired to do personal errands had run a prostitution service from the congressman's Washington apartment. This is from a news article of in the New York Times on August 26th, 1989. I did a quick Google search. Along with that Google search, there was a Washington, according to this, when I click on it, it says Washington Post. I'm clicking on it. It says the story, and the headline is Barney Frank and male prostitute. The male prostitute was running that Frank Barney admitted a lengthy relationship with a male hooker who ran a prostitution service, bisexual prostitution service out of Frank's apartment. Now, this I was not able to find. This is over the years. I've read this article, and I've had many people share with me about it. Barney Frank, at the very end, when he admitted to this, he was stepping down, and I believe this was on the congressional floor. He said, if you come after me, I'm going to tell people what I know, implying what I know about the rest of you. This is how we have names like Bill Clinton. We have names of Bill Gates. We have Prince Andrew on there. We know that Seville, who was involved in this type of stuff, was like a knight, able to go to wherever Prince Charles was. They couldn't stop him. His Secret Service wouldn't stop him. He could go. If Prince Charles was there, he could walk in, no problem.
Right.
What they do is they get these people to back your story up. Barney Frank, and I'm like 99% sure it was on the congressional floor, said, you guys come after me. Basically, he's saying, I'm named names, and I'm going to tell everybody what's going on. So leave me alone. That's how they could. So to your statement of, they'll come to you and say, hey, we've got this information. I need an increase in my budget. Yeah, absolutely.
No question. And you see, and we have just so much documentation.
And I want to point out one more thing. Folks, it's not just the men. There are women that are involved in this too. A former governor of the state of Utah is in the flight log with his wife on one of Epstein's planes. I'm not stating that he was doing immoral things and his wife was, because sometimes these rich people fly on one another's planes. But the bottom line is, it wasn't just once, it was multiple times that a former governor of the state of Utah was on that. And as of a couple of years ago, I was able to find it on the internet. Now it's gone. I can't find it anywhere. So I'm not naming a name.
Right.
Kind of funny how those things disappear.
Well, it's you talked about the Epstein issue. Um, it's much deeper than that. And you said, why are we only getting a few names? Well, here's what the real dilemma is. If federal agencies are involved in the organization and the operation of a very profitable entity, well, I'm not talking about money wise. Imagine what that does for power and influence to be able to blackmail the top leaders of the world. Uh, they don't want that coming out. And quite frankly, what they don't really want coming out is the fact you and I paid for it. Tax dollars went to do that. So where are we at with that situation now? Very simple. When you have that kind of influence, you simply say it's a matter of national security. And what do they mean by that? If you put out how this organization really runs and who's involved with it, you compromise national security by our relationship with other spy agencies all across the world. You throw the world at risk. We can't afford to have you do that. So that's basically where it's at. What I think is interesting, I'm going to say something that you'll have to hold me to a little bit later, but you may get some of these questions answered directly by Epstein himself this year. So just wait and see. Everything is not as it appears to be.
Was it Megyn Kelly that made that statement? And
She's
I'm
one of them that
I'm, I'm not
knows.
going to ask. What's
She's
that?
one of them that knows.
And I'm going to say this. So it was interesting how she phrased it. I know a lot of people have the picture in mind. Well, does that mean he's actually alive? Maybe, but it also could mean that someone has a video of him somewhere saying something in the past as well. So I'm going to hold you to that here in. But I'm sure you'll point out to me. Remember when I said that?
Exactly. The point I'm making to your viewers and your listeners is here's the tragedy. Let's bring it all into focus. We, the American people, and we need to take responsibility for ourselves, have unfortunately taken a path over the years to where we have let other people, unvetted other people, determine our future. You see, freedom is never free. There's always a price to be paid. And what we have done, it started with our educational system. We had our children, in the years, generations ago, you kind of educated them at home or you had an active role in their education. Okay. Then we discovered this great new system the government was going to do called a public education system. And what did we do? Oh, well, we'll just turn them over to the government. That way I get them out of my hair for at least 5 or 6 hours, 7 hours a day. And I trust the government. They'll take care of them. They'll do the right thing. But what do we know nowadays? They teach them no values, no principles, no morals. They teach them how to hate this country. They teach them everything that we don't want them to know. That's what they've done. And we allowed it to happen because we disengaged. Same thing with this country. Well, I've got enough just trying to pay my bills myself. I'm in a great country. Let somebody else run it. I'm sure they'll do the right thing. The government's got it covered. Now we're discovering how corrupt that system has become and how it is being used to turn against the very people who trusted it. And it's time now that we have to decide, are we going to sit back and let it ultimately destroy us? Or are we going to do what our forefathers said, enough's enough, and we're not going to let you take our freedoms and liberties away? We're tying this back into the discussion we just had with Texas. We're getting to a prime example now. Texas is now pushing back and saying, I get what you're saying, Supreme Court. I never wanted to take over the federal responsibility of defending the American people, just the Texas people. I never wanted to determine who could come in and who couldn't. That is a federal role, it's immigration. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to allow you to bring terrorists and criminals into our backyard to rape and kill and destroy our families. And so we have taken the goal, if you won't protect us, we're going to protect ourselves. Now, you just issued an order saying we don't have the right to do that. I don't agree with that order because the very lives of our people are at stake. The Constitution says if there's an imminent invasion, and that's what you call it, it is an illegal invasion. It's not an illegal immigration. It's illegal invasion into this country. And so we're claiming that right under the Constitution. We're going to protect our people. Now the question becomes to you and I and the rest of the American people: are we going to let Texas just do this battle by themselves and once again cop out and sit back and say, "Well, it's not my fight. I mean, I'll let somebody else run it." Are we going to do what our forefathers would have done? We call them Minutemen. What our forefathers would have done and said, "No, we're going to stand united. Federal government, if you're going to abdicate your responsibility, fine, we're going to assume it, but we will defend and protect our families to the bitter end." We're at that stage now. We're coming there very quickly. Every American needs to decide what they're going to do. I was just on a show right before yours. They asked the question, what can America do? Very simple. I tell you that we've got the thin blue line that's crumbling. There's not much of it left. Support what we've got. Make sure those people appreciate and understand that we appreciate the sacrifice they're willing to make for their very lives to protect and defend us. Second of all, we need to face some hard, cold facts from reality. That thin blue line is broke down so far that if you're depending on it to protect you and your family, you're sadly mistaken. That can't happen anymore. So you need to make sure that you are able to assume that responsibility, which quite frankly, God gave you that mandate to begin with as the head of the house. Make sure you're armed, make sure you know how to use it, and whatever permits are necessary, even though the Constitution guarantees us the ability to have arms. And then I said, here's the third thing. This is where people are beginning to jump on board now. We need to let the federal government know that we mean business and that we are willing to defend ourselves. So how can we do that and do it constitutionally and do it legally? I encourage everyone listening to my voice. Every police department should have, most do, have a reserve force. Every sheriff's department should have or do have what we call a posse. And every state should have or usually do a militia or a state guard. You need to call one of those three and say, look, I am willing to volunteer my time to help defend my community. I want to be a part of protecting my community and my family. I want to volunteer. What does that mean? That means they'll give you a little bit of training and they'll actually deputize you as a sheriff deputy, make you a reserve officer for police force, or make you a member of the state guard. All three of those are law enforcement entities. So now have the opportunity to not only defend your family, but to help enforce and uphold the law. And that's where we're at in this country. And how many people are willing to accept the call and go on ahead and spend a little bit of time realizing that you can't live here for free. You have to invest some time if you want to say keep this country free.
I want to read this scripture, and I'm sure you've heard this one before, and you've heard me read it. Second Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. How does that apply to us? Now, frankly, this is my opinion. The founders stated, the founders of the United States of America said that the New Jerusalem would be built here on the American continent. Let's say that you don't buy that entirely, okay? Let's say that you don't believe that. Okay, fair enough. Article 7 of the Constitution, when they said in the year of our Lord, September 17th, 1787, they were declaring the United States Constitution as a agreement with the Lord of the land, who's Jesus Christ. God of this world may be Satan, but they were declaring the Lord of this land is Jesus Christ. So how does this apply? This was written for and to the Israel. I'll give it to you. But if my people, which are called by my name, and frankly, we were a very Christian people, and part of Christ taught that that Christians are grafted into Israel.
Correct.
Right? Okay. If they shall humble themselves, means, hey, I admit my wrongdoing and pray and pray and then seek the face of God. It means seeking truth. That's one of the things the face of God represents is truth. And turn from their wicked ways. Hey, listen, even if I'm not personally doing it, even if I'm not child sacrificing, even if John is not having child prostitution, I need to admit that it's happening in my nation, that it's an evil, that it's a wrong. And whenever I find that it's happening, like it's happening with Epstein, and it sure looks like the CIA, and I'm going to bet the FBI knew what was going on too. I mean, let's be clear. Trump is known. People wanted to point out that Donald Trump was involved with Epstein down in Mar-a-Lago. Soon as he had the slightest inkling that Epstein was doing stuff, he kicked him
Yeah.
out. And then he called up the prosecutor and said, "Hey, any help you need to find out about this jerk face, I'll let you know, and let me know what I can do to help. Let me know whatever I can do to help." Okay? That's the type of things that we need to do and say, "Okay, federal government, what the crap's going on? You better tell us the truth, or we're going to take you out of your. We're going to elect you out of your office. Individuals like me, we're going to do everything we can to sing from the rooftops the evils that you're doing. Representatives, from the representatives all the way down to the guys in the FBI, and I guarantee you, there's people in the education system, the Department of Education, that are involved in this type of
Sure.
crap. We know that professors, for well-known professors, are on those Epstein lists
Right.
within like high education. We know that that was one of the main people that he went out. He went after scientists. So we need to admit the wickedness, and then if we do that, he will hear from heaven, he will forgive our sins, and he will heal our lands. That's huge. That's a scriptural
Right.
promise. And by having people like Michael Letts come on, we help bring that information out. Now, I want to give out the call in line one more time, 385-899-2134. That's 385-899-2134. I don't, I've said from the very beginning, we'd love to have callers if they want to come in. My call screener has just been twiddling his thumbs. He has put up a couple things on the screen, which has been really cool. Michael Lett's website. But the bottom line is, Michael and I have had a great discussion, and people are going to be able to are watching, listening, and going to be able to rewatch and re-listen to this in the future. So we're grateful to have you here. We've got about 15 minutes. And he just put up a note: the lonely call screener. Yes, Dwayne, thank you. So really quickly, I want to mention this, or I want to get to this. What else do you think we need to cover in the last 13 minutes that we have?
Well, I think this is very important to end the program on this particular note, particular issue. Folks, what John said is the bottom line, that if we're going to save this country and the freedoms that we've enjoyed and pass along to future generations, it won't happen by itself. We have to get engaged. And even with our engagement, it won't happen without God's direct intervention. I think God is anxious to spare this country if we'll ask Him to do so. But what we have got to have is we have to have leadership that is willing to call it like it is, drain the swamp, hold people accountable for their actions, and bring about a new era where there's justice and freedom for all once again. We have a man running, and this is not an endorsement, paid endorsement. I'm a charity. We can't endorse people. But we have a prior president who, during his 4-year tenure, demonstrated that he was going after the corruption. And of course, in turn, it has turned on him. And they're using every form and every fashion, attacks personally, attacks legally, attacks financially, any way they can. They've gotten to the point now, anything to be able to stop the number one contender on the Republican side, now Donald Trump. And he has people who are willing to take the mantle with him and do what is necessary to expose the evil and corruption. We were talking about it on this show today. It's no fun talking about a country that I love exposing such evil and corruption. But the only way you're going to heal a wound is to get the infection out first. And so I'm encouraging every American. It doesn't make any difference whether you like the personality, whether you like me, whether you like Trump, that's irrelevant. What is relevant is the fact that we have to have return to standards, principles, and values. And part of returning to standards, principles, and values is exposing the corruption that has gone on for way too long. And so I urge you to do your own research, to search your own records, your own heart, and then to determine that now is the time to stand. Because quite frankly, this is no exaggeration. This is the last time we'll get this opportunity. This is a monumental year. We can either make America great once again, we can restore the values that have made this country great for hundreds of years, or we can sit by like we have unfortunately done in the past and say that's somebody else's responsibility. They'll take care of it. They'll take care of educating my kids. They'll take care of running my country. And unfortunately, what you're going to find out when you wake up is they've destroyed your kids, they've destroyed your country, and you have nothing left and nobody to blame but yourself. So I'm extremely excited for this year. I'm extremely excited for John's show, for the future it has. We're going to be making sure on this show, whenever John invites me back, and he may never invite me back again, but we're going to make sure that every time we're here, we're telling you the truth. We're telling you the corruption, not because we take pride and joy in doing so, but because the only way to heal a wound is to drain the infection out of it. And so we want to hold people accountable, regardless of the cost. Join us in the cause. John, it's just been a great privilege. I know we have a few more minutes. There's a few more other things to talk about, but I wanted to end on this note. You know, folks, let me tell you the values of this country. And I have been all over this country, as John knows, on shows all across. We've got TV shows that we're doing across the country, etc. And as I meet with people, here's what I find: patriotism is still alive, courage, bravery is still alive in this country. We saw that at 9/11 when these first responders rushed in, knowing they weren't coming back out, to try to save as many lives as possible. We see this every day. It just happened a couple of days ago in Michigan, as I recall. Deputy responded to a call of children playing in a pond. One had fell through the ice. And what did she do? She was the first on the scene, threw off her utility belt, dove in. You remember, she's still wearing a vest and all the equipment. When that stuff gets wet, folks, it pulls you under real quick. Didn't give a second thought about whether she could break back through the ice. She was determined to save that child, and she did. That's the kind of spirit that lives in this country today. But it won't last long if we don't give it the opportunity to grow. It's time for you to get engaged and not just listen to the stories, be a part of the stories. You can be a part every day, because I will tell you this: just encouraging other people, telling them thank you for your service, thank you for your courage, thank you for what you are doing, and encouraging other people to have the optimism and the spirit that has made this country great, to bring us back to a nation once again, first and foremost, a nation under God, and second of all, a nation that cares for its people. So I wanted to kind of end on giving some positive stories. I know there's a lot negative that we've had to say that is wrong with this country, but the spirit of this country still prevails. I see it every day in firefighters that rush into buildings to bring rescue people, EMS workers that will refuse to give up on a patient that should be dead on arrival and try to bring them back, law enforcement officers that jump in harm's way to defend you and risk their own lives and don't give a second thought. While they have the opportunity to show that, I know that spirit exists with most Americans today. Please reach in, grab that spirit, bring it out one more time. America needs you. And for all the veterans that are listening right now, as am I, we took an oath. It had no expiration date. This country is recalling every one of you. It is time for us to honor the oath once again, to show the greatness of our spirit because of the greatness of our God, and make sure that we are united together. And we in November show that we are no longer going to tolerate the kind of corruption that exists. It's time for a new day. God bless you. God bless America. John, thank you so much for your show. Whatever else you want to say, I'm sorry that I dominated your time, but thank you for that opportunity.
No, that's why I bring you on here, because no one wants to hear me go on and on. having great guests like you is what I'm going to be doing with this show on a regular basis. There will be times that I will be talking the majority of the show, and that'll be that. But Main Street Media Utah, we're going to bring people that are going to come on here and talk about truth, bring truth to you. Here is something that I feel somewhat bad about. I have people within my own realm, friends of mine that I've known for years and years and years, that I could not convince them to not. They were good Christians. I really think they were good Christians that voted for Joe Biden. We're going to support Joe Biden. And I told them, I said, listen, I'm telling you, there's stories out right now. Ashley Biden has a diary that's come to light that is not being told anywhere but except for shows and stations and groups like this, like you will hear on Main Street Media Utah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me if you didn't hear of this story. Ashley Biden had in a diary that was found, I had uncomfortable showers with daddy.
Well documented, John. And the sad part about it is carrying out that story just a little bit further is what the weaponization of federal law enforcement has done. They went to seize that diary. They wanted to bury it and hide it. They tried to arrest the people who had any access to it or even looked at it, had any. This is not the country that our founding fathers envisioned, and we're going to bring it back. We are not going to let that kind of behavior.
Another story that I told him, I gave him two. I gave him two stories, and then I said, "What's on Hunter Biden's laptop?" He refers, I believe it's in an email or some type of text message, referring to his father as Pedo Joe. Am I wrong on that?
No, that is correct, and we see that every American sees it. They just don't want to acknowledge it. Every time, it's amazing to me how blatant it is. Every time there is a hearing, and there are not many because he's getting so bad mentally that they can't have him in public. But when you do see him in public, first thing he gravitates to is the little girls. And the things that he says that they're caught on mic are just shockingly inappropriate to a child like that. And yet the mainstream media encourages you to, oh, that's just being funny. No, it's not being funny. It's being sick. And quite frankly, we need to call it out for what it is.
Well, we are coming up on our last few minutes of the show. We've got just a little over 3 minutes left. So I kind of want to close it with this. I want to go back to a little bit about Invest USA. Invest is a organization, and it's investUSA.org. It's a place where you can go. It's a group you can go. You can make a donation there. You have the ability to make a donation, and they get money, and they turn those into active shooter vests to help save law enforcement and men on the border, men and women of law enforcement and on the border. I want to say thank you for doing that. Just once again, real quickly, if you can share a little bit about your organization.
Thank you, John. Invest USA was started almost 31 years ago. And that is to provide protection necessary for every officer to come home safely to their families. They deserve that, especially the fact they're willing to put their life on the line for you. Unfortunately, that they don't have the kind of protection that they need, and we have a governmental system that cares more about foreign aid than it does about the American citizen itself. And so we're having to step up and fill in the void. And I encourage you to join us in doing that. RestoringJustice.us is part of Invest USA. And the reason why is we don't just want to make sure our law enforcement system officers are where they need to be, but we don't want to have a two-tier justice system, which we currently experience. You and I both know that if we did half of the stuff that we see some of our upper echelon politicians, Hunter Biden and others do, they'd have never found us. We'd have been so buried under the jail. Yet a two-tier justice system exists. A country cannot survive that way. And that's why we're going to make judicial reform as well as making sure that our officers are properly acknowledged, appreciated, and protected. And so join us on the journey. You can go, like I said, to Invest USA, INVESTUSA.org, donate to their necessary body protection, or you can go to restoringjustice.us. Follow everything we are doing to repair, replace, and recover a true justice system for the United States citizen. God bless you in doing that. We'll look forward to seeing victory on the other side.
There may not be victory for all of us here on this side, but eventually, let's be on God's team, folks. And I will proudly stand shoulder to shoulder. I might stand behind Michael Letts.
We've had more than one experience. Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea.
But Michael Letts, I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you, brother. Michael Letts of Invest USA, thank you so much for being here on Talk with John. God bless you. God bless America. God bless Invest USA. Tell your dear wife, thank you for joining me into the evening, 8 o'clock Eastern time now. And take care, my friend. We'll have you back. I promise you that.
Today is her birthday.
Happy birthday, Karen.
She's over here shaking her head, going, "You're embarrassing me." But I told her I was going to do that. It's her birthday.
Karen, if I was there, I'd give you a big hug, and just let's let the audience see the better half. Okay, we saw you waving.
Drop down. Let me adjust the camera. That's the one that keeps me in line and straight. And I want everybody in America to wish her a happy birthday. You're going to be seeing a lot more over the days ahead. We have a job and a mission to do, and that's to protect the American.
Karen, thank you for sacrificing your birthday. Had I known it was your birthday, I wouldn't have asked him. So,
no worries. Yeah, thank you.
God bless you, Karen. God bless you, Michael. Happy birthday. Take care, Karen. Take care.
Thank you.
Folks, this has been Talk with John on Main Street Media, Utah. We're so grateful for you being here. We're so grateful Michael Letts joined us. Good evening. God bless.